A while, anyway. He's probably about that tall now.
Our dog had 6.
Do what?
Our dog had 6 there.
Oh, you were telling me about that, yeah.
Week old yesterday, so.
Mine or he's, I think 12 weeks.
Is that right?
I have K-rolls right there too, Bill.
Oh, yeah, them
On
there
your,
too?
it's on your spot.
Oh, got it.
I seen where you was given an update on Patchen Street, but have you guys figured out anything else? Have you?
We haven't found something that's just a major problem. Found a bunch of little stuff. We're going through trying to systematically take it all, repair it and whatnot. We did get through the whole area.
Hit their mic. We will break this meeting out. I'll start off with an invocation. Oh Lord, watch over us. Continue to help us all heal and grow through this pandemic and help allow us to make good and right decisions for our citizens of Hannibal. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Do I hear a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
I don't see. Is there anybody on the notepad over there? Doesn't look like it.
No.
Okay. Matt, we'll start off with you.
All right. Just want to give you a few updates on a couple items that occurred over the last month. The utility planning and construction engineer position was filled. Alex Dunker is scheduled to start July 6th. So can't wait for him to get on board and get him up to speed on things. On the electrical side of things, we continue to watch the LMP price continually inch upward. If you look at the historic data there, it's not as bad as it was back in 2018, but it's gradually increasing. So something we're paying attention to. Water system side of things, it's been brought to attention there a few months ago that we're not seeing the same water usage as we have historically, and that trend has continued through the month of May. The month of May was unseasonably cool, so we don't know if that was the reason, but we're continuing to watch that. Second quarter THMs or samples were taken, all of them within regulatory limits, and the locational running annual averages were also low, so everything looks good there. That leads into the second two vessels of the GAC media will be changed out, scheduled to be tomorrow and Wednesday. So
Okay.
that'll be 4 vessels that we have changed out this fiscal year. It seems to be lasting the 9 to 10 months as the original report had planned for. So in a normal year, we'll probably see 6 vessels being changed out instead of the 8 total vessels. So, and that's all I've got on the general manager's report, unless you all have any questions.
No, I'm just glad to hear the GAC is still continuing to go as good or better than we thought, so.
Then, as far as the operations report, an issue that we've had for a while and we thought we had addressed, but it's kind of came back up. It was the Patchen Street area, the I&I getting into the sanitary sewer system there. Over the past 2 years, we've noticed that we've seen more instances where that lift station isn't able to keep up. And so during the month of May, we focused on televising and cleaning that whole area to see if we could find one problem that, maybe under the creek that the sewer main was broke. We did not find that. And so we're going back and reviewing all the TV records. We're going back looking at a report that was done back in 2010 in hopes that we find some problems there that maybe we didn't address at that time that would help contribute to this. But we're also going back and blocking off any of these old service taps to buildings that have been demolished or bought out as part of the flood buyout in that area of town. And with it not being a single instance where we think all this is coming from, we're just going to continue to monitor it over time and see what progress is made. So
Can you dye test any of that?
we can. We have not at this point. We may look at also doing re-smoke testing some areas, especially the lower lying areas, and plan on sending out some information on sump pumps as well. We saw that in the northwest portion of town. We took approximately 20 sump pumps off the system up there, and it addressed our issue at that point. So some people may or may not be aware that you shouldn't discharge your sump pump into the sanitary sewer. So we're going to work with Michaela and send out some information about that. Martin Street project was wrapped up in May. There will be a final change order later in the meeting, just adjusting for final quantities installed. On the electrical side, projects have been moving along. The tie line between Oakwood and Southside, the project's ready to bid, pending final approval of the documents by us. The fenced up station connection, we got the construction agreement signed with Ameren. We're now working on getting proposals in for the 161 to 34.5 transformer. That's a long lead item, probably over a year. So we want to go ahead and get that on order so that it's here when needed. We've also had the preliminary survey work done so that we can so the engineer can lay out the line between here or between Oakwood substation and the connection and get a preliminary layout so we can start talking with landowners and stuff like that where necessary. And we've continued to work with our financial advisor on financing for the project. And as you see, it'll need to address some potential meeting date changes in August and September to help facilitate that borrowing process. And that's all I've got on the operations report.
Okay. Paul?
Good afternoon. Financial report for the month of May 2021. One thing I wanted to start out with before we got into the balance sheet and income statement and everything else was we did update our travel policy in the month of May, and basically what we did there was to get it more in line with the IRS standards, just to kind of protect everybody a little bit better and really take out any personal judgment that might have been involved before. So basically, the main thing is a lot of it didn't change as far as getting hotels and airfare and things like that ahead of travel and coordinating all of that through our current travel policy process and making sure that Courtney is involved with that. One thing we did change is we're going to a per diem rate for meals now based on the IRS guidelines. Essentially, based on whatever region you're in or city you're in, there's a per diem rate that would set how much you would get for dinner, for lunch, for breakfast, whatever meal that you were there. And then all of that would be either put on a BPW travel card or it would be paid for out of personal funds and then reimbursed at those per diem rates whenever the employee were to come back to the office. That was really the main thing. We wanted to get it more in line with IRS standards. And so currently, we're expecting with the COVID restrictions lifting some and the weather warming back up to increase our travel again a little bit. We've got a lot of employees that are in need of some training, whether it be from management perspective or other things. And so we really wanted to get that done and in place before some of that picked back up. So that is the expectation, but we'll keep you updated on how that goes going forward. So looking at the month of May for the balance sheet, unrestricted cash increased by only $23,000. We did see a big jump in payables for the month, about $600,000. The main reason for that is our large annual insurance premium that's due to Myrma every year was booked in May. And so we recognize that obviously as a payable up front, and then we amortize that expense throughout the 12 months. Total assets utility-wide were about 0.4% more than a month ago and about 1.6% higher than a year ago, but really no other significant changes to the balance sheet. So getting down to the income statement and looking at the current month actual compared to our budget, utility-wide net income was about $179,000 more than budgeted for May. Just based on historical weather, May is projected to be a shoulder month, but all three funds did fare significantly better than expected. Revenues were still down about 4% in the electric fund, but operating expenses were down even more at about 21%. Water fund pretty much followed the same trend with much lower operating expenses that we've been used to seeing all year. So it had a very good month. And the sewer fund also had a good month for the same reason. It exceeded budgeted net income by about $35,000. So the current month actual compared to last year, very, very similar results, only about a $13,000 less of a net income. Kilowatt hour sales in the electric fund were up about 7.5% from the same month a year ago. So that's now a trend of 4 straight months of increased kilowatt hour usage compared to last year. Something to note. The year-to-date actual numbers compared to budget, we've only got a month left in this current fiscal year, and we're now about 34% or approximately $1.1 million less than what we'd budgeted. Mainly the main factor there is obviously the electric fund. It's about $1.3 million behind budget due to the higher purchase power costs associated with the polar vortex back in February. Revenues for the electric fund continue to lag behind. Kilowatt hour sales are about 202 million compared to 215 million kilowatt hours last year. We do continue to see a healthy water fund. Main contributing factor there is just lower operating expenses. And then the sewer fund continues to be over budget on operating expenses slightly and slightly under budget on revenues. So it's just a little bit less than budgeted overall. Last item there is our year-to-date actual compared to the same time frame last year. Utility-wide net income is about 35% less than the same time period last year. Operating revenues are down about 2%, and operating expenses are up about 6%, which is causing that worse position overall. So we did see positive results in all three funds for May, primarily due to the cooler weather that Matt mentioned. Obviously, our year-to-date numbers are way down, just due to that huge impact that we'll talk a little bit more later in the meeting from February's event. We've talked about it over and over. We've got the significant financing that's coming up, so we'll continue to monitor our budget very closely just to make sure that we're in a healthiest position as possible leading into that bond rating that we have coming up. Next page there just has our check register, cash reserves, everything we're used to looking at. I did want to go ahead and bring your attention down to page 21. As promised, we're going to continue looking at that debt service coverage ratio on a monthly basis. Again, per our bond covenants, we are required to maintain a 1.25 debt service coverage ratio. And compared to last month, all three funds did increase slightly in that ratio, which is a good sign. Obviously, the water fund is the one we're keeping the closest eye on, as we do have the most debt right now in that fund. And it is currently at 2.1. So we'll continue looking at that on a monthly basis just to make sure we're checking that box. That's all I had as far as the financial report goes. Any questions on anything?
Anybody? No, I don't. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, thank you.
Before I forget about it, Matt, did we have any significant damage with the storms? No.
I think the only thing we had last night was a cable TV line down, and a couple of small power outages the night before.
Good. All right. Schedule our rates and fees, Paul.
Okay, so we talked about this last month and kind of got it before you as far enough in advance as we hope to get it in front of you as far in advance as possible before we set any kind of rate hearing or anything like that. So hopefully you had maybe another chance to look at that and some of the changes that we were proposing. I combined them all here in a little bit of a summary. Again, our current document is called the Schedule of Fees and Charges, and then we have separate rate schedules for our electric, water, and sewer funds. And what we're proposing to do is combine all of those documents into a single document called the Schedule of Rates and Fees, just to kind of streamline anytime there's changes and to make it easier for Corey whenever he's passing things out to prospective clients, things like that. But really the main changes there that I've summarized are some updated wording associated with service charges for disconnection for non-payment and return payment fees, some updated wording associated with the utility security deposit, as we are going to be basing that on the results of a credit check. Now, we've talked to you about the change in that policy. Removing the fees for underground meter pedestals, as these are no longer relevant. increasing the charges for water taps. Those costs haven't been updated in over 10 years, so we're just getting those more in line with current labor and material rates and things like that. Increasing the charge for biological oxygen demand testing, which is done by the wastewater treatment plant. We'd be increasing that from $26 to $30, just to bring it more in line with the rest of the testing fees done by that plant. And then the last item on there is we're no longer proposing a surcharge for extra strength fats, oils, and grease at this time. We're continuing to gather more information on that just to make sure it's appropriate. And so we'll continue looking at that and monitoring it, but at this time we're not going to include that surcharge on there. So we did go ahead and include the schedule of rates and fees again, just with those changes on it. So you can see that on the next few pages. And then we've also got all of the prior documents on there with their red line copies, just so you can go through each of the individual changes that we're proposing. So really, the next step would be the board authorizing a rate hearing that would take place at a time that would immediately be followed by the board meeting to get those changes to actually be able to take effect. So at this time, if the board is comfortable with all the proposed changes, we can go ahead and authorize us to schedule that rate hearing. If you feel like you need more time to look at things or you want to push it off, we can entertain that option as well.
I don't need more time. Any of y'all?
No, we've seen this stuff for a couple of months and it looks good. I mean, I'm glad it's all inclusive. It makes a lot of sense.
You want to schedule it for next month?
Yeah, we can certainly look at that. We've got a new business item on there to talk about some other date changes, and so we'll probably kind of talk about all of that at the same time just to make sure everything lines up and we've got everything timed out correctly.
Sounds good.
So we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Okay. You're still up, Paul. The last thing you want to hear when you're playing golf.
That's right. All right. So another item that we discussed at last month's board meeting was the surplus of the diesel generators. And so as you're aware, in order to complete the upgrade of the Oakwood substation that we've been working on for quite a while, the 8 diesel generators that are on site would need to be moved. And the estimated cost for that is about $800,000 to $1 million, somewhere in that ballpark. And so we do own 10 diesel generators total. The other 2 that aren't on site over there at Oakwood are at the wastewater and water treatment facilities. Right now, we owe about $3.6 million on that lease. That's through 2027. And again, the generators do provide us about 16.4 megawatts that's pledged through MISO. And as you know, we do have a requirement of so much capacity that we have to have through MISO in order to meet our requirements with the electricity. We've ran quite a few numbers and looked at everything over and over. The generators are costing us right about $600,000, $700,000 a year, somewhere in there, between the lease payment, maintenance, warranty, things like that, testing we have to do every year, and that actually doesn't include some larger expenses that we might have here in the next year or two to do some upgrades that would be required. So really what it comes down to is about $3, maybe even north of $3 a kilowatt month. And right now, in this current fiscal year, we can buy that same capacity on the MISO marketplace for about 15 cents a kilowatt month. So a pretty big disparity there. So another thing we discussed last month was how the generators have only been used once in the 4 years that we've had them, for their intended purpose, that is. And so really last month the board authorized us to go ahead and go out and send a request for proposal to sell the generators. We did that. Those bids came in and were due on Friday. And so we did receive 3 bids for the generators. We provided you over the weekend that recommendation that BHM&G had put together. And based on the recommendation, to accept the bid from Iron Flag Power Systems at $5,025,000 as it represents the best value to the board at this time. I did want to point out, and you saw in there, that this price could go up slightly. There was one transformer that was not included in that bid that is a spare that we would have no use for, so we would plan to negotiate that into the total value. If you look at the bid, it's pretty simple to go ahead and factor in what the value would be in that transformer based on all the other bids that came in for each of the generators individually. So, if the board were to accept this bid, this will allow us to pay off the lease in full. Again, we owe $3.6 million on it, and we can turn right around and use those remaining funds toward the new 161 kilovolt line and the upgrade of the Oakwood substation. And it would immediately be a cash positive impact, obviously. And then we turn right around and take advantage of the current low pricing in the capacity marketplace. And then we'd continue to explore other options of obtaining low-cost renewable capacity elsewhere down the road if needed. We always talk about diversifying that portfolio, so looking at some wind energy, things like that, if it were relevant and the right opportunity came up, continuing to have those discussions. So really at this time, we're requesting that the board accept the proposal from Iron Flag to sell the 10 diesel generators at a price of $5,025,000. And then any additional increase in value based on that other transformer would not require separate authorization, would be the assumption. But
Any comments from the board? Do I hear a motion?
Not me.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
okay, thank you.
All right, Martin Street change order.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier during the operations report, Martin Street was paved back in April, and what you have before you this afternoon is change order number 2. It's just updating the contractor's pay based upon the actual installed quantities. The street paving required a little bit more aggregate base and a little bit more pavement to be laid down than was in the original plan. And there was a few things that we also deducted out of that contract as well. And so what it ends up being is a net change of $3,128, and this will close out that project. So just requesting the board approve change order number 2 as submitted for the Martin Street project by McMaylor and Sons.
I make a move, we do that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Nice
Thank
job
you.
on that, by the way, Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good.
Next item on the agenda is discuss of date and time of the board meeting. Been a couple of things like Paul alluded to regarding the public hearing. There's been some discussion about maybe moving the board meeting back to a later time, and we just wanted to talk with you all about that, just so we can get this hashed out as it affects setting times for a special meeting for the bonding for the electric project and whatnot. So just want to take this time to do that.
I think the discussion was moving it back to 4, was that correct?
That would work for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's only a half-hour change, but that's,
And then with the public hearing, we've heard some discussion as well about moving it back to after 5 p.m. so more people could attend. Is that something that we want to do, as it would affect the July board meeting?
yeah, I'm fine with that.
If you do your public hearings after your meeting, does that affect?
Well,
your
no,
ability?
we would move the meeting as well, but this would set the time for the meeting. We want to hold the meeting and the public hearing the same day,
So, right. So you're just talking about. just
July
a-
only
just-
on this one. Yes.
I laugh because, guys, you've moved your meeting up, while I've been city attorney, I don't know, 8 times.
Days
Yeah.
and times.
Yeah, I mean, days, times, blah, 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 blah. And I understand you don't care about my schedule. I'm just like, can you pick
No.
a day and stick to it?
Yeah.
There is some consistency though, that the public needs to know that we're within a window here, not a big
The,
change. But for the public hearings, should you have it at the same time?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. One of the things they tried at one point was people had complained and said, well, we can't make it to the meetings. So they moved them to like 5 o'clock, and then nobody showed up and nobody came.
Yeah.
And then there was further discussion. They said, well, this is inconvenient for staff, and it means, you got to pay overtime and blah, blah, blah for staff to attend. Why don't we move it back? And I'm not aware that there was much, if any, pushback on that issue. So I think the public needs to have the right to come, but I think the point you made of what's better for the public, have it after 5 o'clock, or have it, they know that it's always going to be on a
And it's-
particular date and at a particular time.
We have
But-
videos, so.
But I mean, you guys are. I'm just playing devil's advocate and throwing it out there. I joke and tease you guys, but ultimately, you do with your meetings what you want. I'll get there whenever. But I just question whether bouncing it around like that is a good idea. In that it's tough for the public to know when it's going to be. They have to go look for it. Whereas if they had some consistency and always knew it will always be on X date at X time, it's easier for interested parties to come. And when you guys do that, I don't care.
For the public hearing though, are you thinking after 5 o'clock, or are you
There was
thinking
some discussion that I've heard before that we said that if we wanted to have a public hearing, they wanted it after 5 o'clock. So I just wanted to bring it up just so that we could plan the July meeting or.
It's certainly been discussed before.
Yes.
So if we have our July meeting at 4 and then end at 5 with the public hearing.
Well, we need to have the public hearing
Beforehand,
first so that we
okay.
can approve the schedule of
I
raising
see.
fees so that it can go into effect 14 or 15 days later.
I see.
What's the rest of you?
Are we talking about moving the permanent time for the board meetings to 4?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really heard anything from anyone about having a public hearing after 5 or before 4. And I don't think it makes that much difference if somebody really
Okay.
feels like they need to come, have the public hearing at 4 as a part of the precursor to the meeting, and then start the meeting after.
I'm fine with that.
I would agree.
Okay.
So we'll just have the regular meeting at 4 with the, or
Starting with the
public hearing starting at 4 with a regular meeting to follow.
Correct.
Do
Yeah,
we
you
have
can
to
just
have
put,
that?
you can just put in your posting that the regular meeting will start immediately upon the conclusion of the public hearing. That way, if it's a 5-minute public hearing, you'll be pretty quick. If it's a half-hour public hearing, you'll be a little late.
Yep. Okay. Do we need a motion or anything for that?
We usually
It wouldn't hurt, you not
Okay.
necessarily have it, but it is board action, so I'd suggest going ahead and doing a vote.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then in August, I know with the schedule that Paul's worked out with Joy, it actually, due to the rate or the bond sale or the rate sale, it actually works better if we push it back a week. I personally won't be here the scheduled board meeting next month, so, or not next month, but August as well. And so I don't know if we can move it back to the 25th, which would be the fourth Monday, or 23rd. 23rd. And then also that bond sale requires a special meeting to be held right before the council meeting on the 7th of September. And I guess it's something you've seen in an email as well. So just need to get, I guess, a motion to do that as well.
Move it to the 23rd.
move it to the 23rd at 4 o'clock, and then a special meeting
September 7th.
September 7th. Was there a time that it just has to be before the council meeting?
Yeah, I probably assumed that it would just be a 4.
They usually do theirs right before their council meeting, so I'd say they'd probably set it at 6:30. Wouldn't you say, James?
Normally, 6:30 or 6:45.
6:30 or 6:45.
I mean, just for a special meeting for us, we've got to approve.
This is not a public hearing?
No, this
Oh,
isn't a public,
okay,
this
yeah.
is so that
Sorry.
you all can approve the rates that Joy gets, proposed
We-
for that day. And we need your all's approval before we take it to council that evening. So,
Gotcha.
4 o'clock on that day as well?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Rest of you?
July
Wait, I'm-
7,
Yes,
you said?
sir.
We're talking July or August, I'm confused.
July 7th on the special meeting.
Okay.
Or September.
September.
Killing me.
September 7th on the special meeting and moving the August meeting to the 23rd.
Okay.
Calendar negotiations take forever.
I just wanted to make sure I understood what you were talking about. Okay.
Yep.
Do you hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
And with the August meeting, there's some training that was previously scheduled with it. I think it was 2:30 is what Beverly had said. Is that something you want to continue to have on the 16th?
What was the training for again?
Social media. If not, we'll have to try to get Contessa to
for all of our people too.
Mm-hmm.
The entire staff has training that day, and our Contessa's coming up to do it. And that's the time that we had chosen because it was before the board meeting in August.
On the 16th, you said?
Yeah.
yes,
At what
Of
time?
July.
2:30
Okay,
August.
August, okay.
I'll have to check.
I think I'm okay with that date.
Okay.
Anybody
I'll
else?
let her know. If you got any problems with it, let Courtney know, and we'll work through that.
All right.
That's all the meeting changes that we have. Thank you.
All right, Paul.
So yeah, with that, we might have Courtney send out maybe an update email, maybe later this week or early July that kind of rehashes all those changes out, so you've got it in your email. Okay, so municipal utility emergency loan. So we've talked about it over and over, but you're well aware that the HBPW was severely impacted by Winter Storm Uri back in February. You may or may not know that Governor Parson did sign legislation on May 13th to provide $50 million of no-interest emergency loans to municipal electric and natural gas utilities for any wholesale electricity or natural gas costs incurred as a result of extraordinary prices between February 10th and February 20th of this year. Now, these loans will be awarded on a first-come, first-served basis and will be repayable for a term of up to 5 years with no penalty for early repayment. The program that's been put together is being issued through Missouri DNR, through their Division of Energy, and they began accepting applications on June 2nd. So I've got it calculated there below, but the overall net impact to us was determined to be $814,000. So our plan would be to apply for $750,000 under this program. These funds would free up excess cash flow to be used for the electrical financing later this fall or elsewhere as needed. Again, they are zero interest and repayable up to 5 years. So at this time, management is just requesting that the board authorize us moving forward with the application process. I did include the application there on the following pages. I did mention that they began accepting applications on June 2nd, and it's a first-come, first-served basis. I did reach out to the director in charge of the program. He did say funding was still available. However, he said he could not guarantee that it would still be available by the time we got applied. And so if the board were to approve us moving forward with the process, it would require both a resolution and an ordinance to be approved by city council before we could complete that process. There would be an option that maybe we could do an emergency reading, so that it would require just one reading instead of two. But we're still looking at early to mid-July before the application could be submitted. So really, we're just requesting that the board authorize us moving forward with the application at this time.
So Paul, what would the net effect of this interest-free loan for 5 years be to us?
Well, I mean, it would be, if we applied for the $750,000, we would receive that in a lump sum. And really those funds can be used on anything because you're reimbursing yourself for the extraordinary costs that were incurred. And so if you look on there, our normal MISO purchase power bill runs around $90,000 to $100,000. And for those 2 weeks, it ran at $1.1 million. And then there's a couple other calculations on there as well. And so really just getting that excess cash flow would, provide us extra funding to be able to use towards the financing later this fall if needed. Say those bids that we went out for bid for came in much higher than anticipated, and we had to use some reserve funding. We could use this funding for that. If everything goes perfectly over the next couple months, we could always repay some of that money right back if we wanted to as well. So it would technically be putting debt on our books a little bit. It would come in the form of leveraged financing, but I think it would be pretty easy to explain to the creditors, for example, or the folks that are coming in to do our bond rating, that this is zero interest. You never like to say free money, but it's money that's available to utilities that were severely impacted, which we would definitely fall under that category. So I just feel that it would be our fiscal responsibility to go ahead and apply for it, if it's available.
Would it be saving us interest anywhere else?
Well, we could certainly, if we wanted to, we could, take those proceeds and put it towards other debt, and pay down other debt that we have that does have interest associated with it. So really, the terms that they're listing are 5 years, no interest, semi-annual payments. So you would take the $750,000 and amortize that over 60 months in semi-annual payments. I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but I could certainly put those together at what it would cost to pay that back over that time period.
Well,
Benefit is just basically allowing more access to revenue in case and later that we need it, because the resolution kind of threw me off. At one point in this resolution, it says, without the emergency action and aid, the increased prices required to purchase wholesale electricity and or national gas will result in significantly higher than normal utility bills for the citizens of the city.
Yeah, we certainly didn't have that case here, to where we actually, we've said it over and over how we didn't increase rates. We're aware of certain municipalities that did. They actually socialized that cost into everyone's bill over a certain time period by increasing it. We were fortunate enough to not have to do anything like that. As far as I know, that is not a requirement that you had to do something drastic like that in order to apply for this funding.
Okay.
I would certainly think that the municipalities that did have to do things like that would want to apply as soon as possible. But like I said, I don't believe it's a requirement that I'm aware of.
Would we do the application out of current staff, or do we hire an outfit to do that?
I think we'd be able to do it. It would take a little bit of time, but I think the main thing they're looking for is proof that you did incur significant costs, and I think that just comes simply in the fact that you could provide January and February's 2020 bills compared to January and February of 2021, and it's pretty easy to see the increase. And then the actual application, here is just a couple pages, and then obviously we would have to go to City Council for the ordinance agreements, and they've already put that all together for us. It's just obtaining the signatures for those. So I don't anticipate tons of significant time needing to be spent on it.
Is there a chance that this will be forgivable? Has there been any talk of it? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but
Right, yeah, I
Can't count on that.
yeah, I wouldn't think so with everything else. That's always a possibility, I suppose, but I believe they're pretty well through their budget process, when they appropriated these funds. And so, for that to be an option, there would have to be something else or someone that's still kind of, prodding at them to get that to happen. And I'm not aware of any of that right now. Anytime
It's state money, so it's pretty unlikely it would be forgivable because unlike the federal government, the state of Missouri has to balance their budget and they only spend money they have.
Really?
Yeah, I said it. I know that's going to be on the internet. It's pretty unlikely that they would do a forgivable loan.
So playing a little catch up, how, because I wasn't here at that time.
Sure.
How did you cover the increase in purchase price, just from revenue?
Well, yeah, reserve funding, actually. Yeah, we've 2 or 3 years ago, maybe even more than that, we put together a cash reserve policy in which we started building reserves for this exact type of event if it were to occur. And so, yeah, we were very fortunate to be able to use that funding that was available to cover all of those costs. And, without that policy in place, it may not have been a possibility as we saw with other municipalities that didn't have.
And it was a significant impact, and getting this loan will help you rectify that.
Essentially, it'll just replenish those reserves right back to the levels that they were before we had the impact. Yep.
Any more discussion?
well, so based on our current CD rates that we have most of the reserves in, we would end up, if we just put it away, gain $9,700 over that period if we just banked it and put it in CDs and didn't need it. It doesn't strike me as something that we really need. But I haven't really looked into it all this much. That's why I'm wondering, what the benefit is that we're really looking to get out of getting this.
As I stand here today, I agree with you that we don't probably need it. But like I said, with going out for bid on so many different items and the uncertainty out there and material costs and labor costs of some of these construction companies, those bids could come in 10, 15, 20% higher. And that's a whole other discussion. But,
Sure.
Having this excess cash at zero interest, that's kind of rare, type of thing. And so having that available if bids were to come in that much higher, it would be very, very helpful. And then I guess the other thing I was going to say on that is, you never know when we're going to have a tornado come through tomorrow. We had a decent storm last night, and we're going to have another contingency, heaven forbid. But anytime you can get zero interest financing and you have the ability to use it how you see fit, it's a pretty good opportunity. But certainly I agree with you that we probably don't need it to be able to get by with our normal operations right now.
It may put off in the future the need to do a rate increase as well. Like with the ice storm, we used about $400,000 to help pay in the restoration efforts there. If we were to, like Paul said, have another storm event where we had to dip into reserves, it may force our hand that we had to raise rates at that time. And so by replenishing our reserves at this point, it may delay the need for that rate increases at that time.
I have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
Your plan for repayment, you said it's biannual, the payments over 5 years?
Correct.
And what will you use? What is your strategy for repayment as far as reserve, or are you planning to repay if you don't use this, repay out of this? What is your repayment plan for it?
There'd be 10 payments, 75,000 each, every 6 months for 5 years.
That's the numbers that come out to, yeah. So, yeah, essentially, yeah, it would just be a reordering of reserve funding that we still have.
Okay.
You know, and then based on revenues that are coming in, you know, balancing those two things. You know, if we have a extremely mild, you know, winter, obviously revenues are going to be a little bit down, so we're going to have to lean a little bit more on reserve funding. If we had a very, very hot summer, revenues would be up, and we'd have a little bit more operating cash flow to be able to use towards repayment. That's kind of how it works in balancing that type of thing on a monthly basis.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? Is anybody in favor of doing this?
So move, make the loan application.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah.
Opposed? Good.
Thank you.
So that's something you'll have sent off pretty soon?
So, yeah, next step would be going to city council, and the first reading would be, and I'll definitely get a hold of Angel here this week to work with her on getting on their agenda, obtaining city council approval and passing the resolution and the ordinance. And then, once that's done, it'll go on to Missouri DNR for,
Do you need anything from us before you go to the city? Signatures or anything like that?
I don't believe so. I believe both the resolution and the ordinance will be signed by the mayor.
Okay,
So I think that was all we needed.
okay. Sounds good. Thank you. James?
I have no comments.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any general discussion?
I don't have anything.
Hearing none. Do I hear an motion for adjournment, since we don't have to go in closed session today?
So move.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Wow.
Nice, they're all like this, right?
Under an hour.
They're all